Okay, shall we take some questions from the audience? We have a couple more minutes. Jump up. Yes, go ahead.
Just speak loud. So I mean, we've had the panel of different donors talking, and about different donors talking about kind of some of the challenges that they face, but we haven't actually talked about the challenge of working with each other. And I just wondered if maybe you could address that briefly, because we seem to step on each other's toes quite often, especially where I am in the Sahel. And I'm just wondering if any of you have seen examples in other areas of the world, maybe that has been reduced. When I worked in Afghanistan, what the Afghanistan government requested was that we split the country into 4, and that each of the main donors actually works in one of those areas, and it actually worked out quite well. So just leave it at that.
Do you guys go in it?
Going to take some more questions.
Oh, okay, over here, yes.
This is actually a good follow-on to that question. Earlier this morning in the Resilience Learning Consortium panel, we heard a need and a desire for donors to coordinate better and work together, pooled funding, things like that. So I was just wondering, after you kind of do the analysis of the challenges, maybe you could talk about the opportunities to also work together. Thanks.
Take another one, back here, yeah.
Hi, I'm Maggie Ibrahim with World Vision UK. I just wanted to pick up on the last point. It seems that transformation and empowerment was only mentioned right at the end when we started to talk about gender. And I love resilience. I'm what's called a resilience manager, but I'm often disheartened by how it's very much a technical conversation. I understand we're now in a paradigm shift linking development and humanitarian action together. But as a practitioner organization, it's important for us to look at how resilience can promote transformation, and that leads to what we're doing about equity, what we're doing about bringing rights-based approaches into resilience. And I was wondering if any of our donors could speak to how they're doing that in that concerted effort, and perhaps in the context of conflicts. So I might put that to my good friend Tim.
What? Okay, one more, yeah.
I have a quick question in a loud voice, so don't worry about the microphone. I'm from the National Academy of Sciences in the US, and I'm curious as to what types of evidence you're looking for. I think it was used in the US for evidence, and I'm curious as to what types of evidence would be helpful for you to continue your programming, which is really important for the whole world. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, let's let them, who wants to go first? Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I'll take a couple. I mean, I think it is true that an awful lot of our organizations, and I think this is true of UN agencies as well, we've really had to go through an internal process of breaking down the stovepipes internally, and I think it's well timed. I wish you would high-five me, Tim. But I think it's well timed that we take that next leap, which is enhanced coordination together. And I think that there are models that are working. It's great that we can have conversations, and we do need to coordinate on a global level. But if we look at the Arid Semi-Arid Lands Donor Working Group in Kenya, and that as a institution in which both humanitarian and development donors are coming together and thinking about this and supporting the National Drought Management Authority. Similarly, the Red FS in Ethiopia. I think that those are some models. It may not have fully come to bear yet in terms of what's happening in the Sahel, and I think so. There is a need to engage in global processes, to engage in the regional processes such as Algiers and the Idrissi through IGAD, but really at the national level, that's where we really have the opportunity to come together. So I think we're well reminded that we maybe haven't fully gone there. I think in terms of evidence, just to take up that question, we have a fairly specific set of goals and targets set around a set of outcomes. One is a reduction in humanitarian assistance needs, and we have different targets set for the Horn and the Sahel. Another is a depth of poverty, household hunger score, and global acute malnutrition as a distinct nutritional feature of these dryland areas. We've set aggressive targets, and I do want to say As compelling as that first indicator is, reduction in humanitarian assistance needs, we recognize how problematic it is. It speaks directly to the economic rationale for what we're doing. For the U.S. government's part, we spent $1 billion in humanitarian assistance in the Horn in 2011, another $500 million in the Sahel. And let's be honest, that has been a driver, this sort of value for money and the stuff that DFID did on that, showing the sort of return in terms of avoided aid, avoided livestock loss, and developmental benefits. So it is problematic in the sense that how do you compare future droughts with current droughts? And that's actually probably the easiest fix in terms of finding a variable we can normalize to put future droughts in current drought terms. The real challenge, as everybody in this room probably knows, is the way in which humanitarian assistance figures are determined isn't entirely consistent across countries or within countries at the same time. So I think it's important to have that as a very sort of expedient indicator, but to really focus on these more robust ones. And then there's going to be a session, is it tomorrow, on resilience measurement? I think the other big leap forward is resilience isn't just about what are the right outcomes we measure, it's about what are the right capacities that allow people to experience a shock or stress, and how does that result in a series of target outcomes. So how do we actually measure capacities? How do we do so at individual, household, community, and various systems levels? And I think a lot of the thinking about resilience measurement is there.
Okay, I'll pick up on the evidence one because I think it's very, very true. And I think we came at the evidence question after the humanitarian emergency response review from the humanitarian, very much the humanitarian agenda policy area, where there is very little evidence, very little research, very little learning in the humanitarian field. And we set up the Humanitarian Innovation and Evidence Programme, which I think is the only sort of like research program in this area. And my department works very closely with our research and evidence department. And within that pot of money, that's not all we're doing. We do have, sort of many streams of work which are looking at resilience, and it is around insurance, it is around cash transfers. And I was going to talk to the value for money, which isn't within that, because you don't need a lot of money to produce some quite compelling evidence. That's what I'm finding. And yes, sort of after the 2011 emergency, from my experience in Ethiopia, I knew that if you got in quickly and did the maths to find out how much a late humanitarian response cost, we've got some funky economists who can then do modelling of a counterfactual on the early response. And then the more difficult leap of faith was to building resilience because we don't really have the knowledge and the data and the measuring in that one. But that study flew, and we've used value for money to get some of our policy agendas forward to our ministers. And I know it's not only about value for money, but we don't just talk about money. We talk about livelihoods, sort of value for money on a livelihoods basis, which is what that study talked to. We're about to do a similar thing on cash transfers and putting that up against NFIs and different, because people, it's something that you can then say, this is good evidence, this has been shown in this way, to get more sort of people around it. I forgot to mention, we also did a study around disasters and women and girls to make the point that natural disasters, that there is actually quite a lot of sort of bandied around evidence about typhoons in Bangladesh, that women and children are more affected than men, and that was trying to put some sort of rigour onto that. So I think it's an area that you can take as far as you want, and I think it's really important. I feel I have to answer Maggie's question. Rights and equity. We learnt a lot from our side from the paper that Oxfam produced, because I think that was the first paper that came out about resilience and rights and equity. And I think that we have been sort of looking to that in doing our work in contexts of conflict like Somalia. And there's a big protection issue, there's a big refugee issue, there's a big displacement issue. And again, who are the people who are most affected by, which is what Greg talked to. But it's another layer that we have to add in to a very complicated program setting at the moment. But I think a lot of good work's going on in Bangladesh with the Chores Livelihoods program, where there is a big women empowerment and women education part of that. And that's like the Productive Safety Net program in Ethiopia with whistles and bells. And I think that the Productive Safety Net program is going to get to that eventually.
Just a few key points I wanted to mention in terms of donors working together, pooled funding. I mean, obviously, again, a different kind of entity at the foundation level, but we have had a number of really great partnerships with DFID and USAID and many others. And I think the funding is there. It's about leaning in together around the other work, not just putting your money out, but also going through the process together and the learning about these various projects and how our respective staff can actually work more collaboratively, I think is where we probably could do more. And, you know, just the whole planning process, and not for there to be just a pot of money that we pull together, but more of how we go through this, how we go through the whole process of identifying a problem space, looking at the analysis and trying to figure out what investments to make, probably would be beneficial. On the types of evidence, I just wanted to mention there are two areas that the foundation has been looking at very closely. One is around urban resilience and the other is around social resilience. Again, from our learning of our ACERN work, we've been just trying to understand better what makes for a resilient city. What are the indicators and variables around that to make for a resilient city? And we've just had an outfit, Arab International Development, who's worked with ACERN and is now working in a different capacity with us to create a city resilience index. And that index first started, interestingly, with a focus mainly on what people think about in the city context, infrastructure and economic well-being. But it has really grown after some rigorous research, literature reviews, and case studies to be much more comprehensive in looking at health and well-being in urban contexts, looking at leadership, really focusing on urban systems infrastructure, not just on infrastructure. And so the extent to which we might be able to have these frameworks that allow us to see the systems in all of its dimensions versus just in a few key ones, I think really helps to get more quickly to the evidence question, at least to help us to get there more quickly. And the same for social resilience. It's a key part that we've been working together with Lund University, for instance, in their work around measuring and assessing and profiling individual and community resilience and thinking about the psychosocial determinants of resilience of individuals and communities. And that's the kind of evidence that we would like to, or data rather, that we would like to have more of, just really focusing on the livelihoods questions. But when we look at these different domains, they obviously are going to be different, actually. So